To be an entrepreneur, to me, it means taking the things that the Lord has given you and you're using them to develop an economy in some way, along with extending the kingdom simultaneously. So to me, an entrepreneur would be someone who is generating income, revenue, to build up a community that he's involved or she is involved with. I think the mandate of Genesis 1 and 2 for us would be to see that what God has brought forth, the primary reason for God bringing it forth is for it to multiply and grow. Any seed, any animal, anything that God created in Genesis 1, and then man comes along. And God has given him the opportunity to flourish by overseeing and being the steward of that which God has now created, which is a monumental thing, that we would be asked to oversee something that God would create. And so that's how, in my opinion, man would flourish the greatest as he now fulfilling his role in overseeing the things that God has given to him so that it may flourish indeed. I think by and large the world would subdue a person and his interests and try to fit him into the world's system. But God has gifted each individual, and when that individual flourishes through exercising his gift, it's just incredible what the Lord can do. The creativity, the spontaneity that comes from that is just unimaginable, really, when you think about it, if you could multiply that with everyone flourishing in that way. I think sometimes the term heavenly minded carries with it the idea that you're thinking about what's going to be instead of what is. And I think about heaven. Heaven's a great place. It's prepared for those who love Jesus and have received Him. That's a good thing. But God has placed us here in this moment for some particular reason, and that is to be leaven in our community, to affect our community for the kingdom and for eternity. Our process sometimes, we look at our life in the span of 70 or 80 years that God has given us. But God doesn't look at our life that way. God looks at our life in terms of eternity. What will your life look like in eternity based upon the 70 or 80 years that God has given you? And it's outliving yourself. It's investing in things that outlive you. And that's in human lives. And I think the church can become too heavenly minded, and they're always singing about heaven, talking about heaven, but they're missing the reality of helping people in the present. And sometimes that can be a problem. I think meeting needs in the community in such a way that the integrity of the citizens in that community will be uplifted. And the self-worth of that community will be uplifted. I don't think a church needs to go out and be involved in the community to make their church bigger. God knows how to do that without going out in your community. But there has to be a heartfelt response to the community and the needs so that the church can provide that, so that that person not only grows financially, physically, but also spiritually. And that's the holistic part that we sometimes miss, because the church is afraid, has been afraid historically, of getting overly involved in the community because of the way we perceive what church is. But I perceive church as being an investment of God in the community, like an outside investor would invest in a business. God has invested that church in that community for a particular reason so that the whole community can now be benefited in many ways. I think our ministry is certainly engaged in holistic ministry. The Lord has brought into being 22 different kinds of ministries, and each one of those ministries, for instance, brings in income. I'll just give you an example. Our stables, We do horseback riding, we charge for that. We do arena rides, we charge for that. We have cabins and bunkhouses that we rent out, that brings people in. But at the same time, we're now affecting a community because we bring local kids into these camps, in these facilities that God has given us at no charge. And we tell them about life principles, how they can become better people, and also share with them the gospel, and that's where our identity should eventually lie, is in the Lord Jesus. And so we're able to share all that, and the community is built up through a ministry. Not only does the community built up, but when kids come and they receive Christ, their parents receive Christ, and now the local churches are also growing because we're filtering those into the churches. So everybody benefits, and that's what a holistic involvement should look like.